So today on Science with GH, we are going to be testing different methods of knitting to see which ones cause me the least pain, fatigue, and stress. Basically, how can I knit for longer than a few minutes at a time, which has been a struggle for me for the last several months. Due to my chronic health conditions, I have joint pain, inflammation pain. I have hand tremors that get quite bad under certain conditions, and I found it really difficult to knit lately, which is really sad because I love knitting. So this all came about because someone had suggested to me to try supported straight knitting, which I honestly hadn't given much thought to because I've always heard that circular needles are easier on the hands for a number of reasons. But I'm willing to try it at this point. So what I've done is I've set up an experiment. I have a piece of knitting that I started working flat. I am going to work on this piece in 3 different experiments, and then I'm going to also work on a pair of socks for a 4th experiment, which is going to be the only project that's on a different weight of yarn. So the experiment is I am going to knit using 4 different methods. I'm going to knit in each method for 10 minutes. And after the 10 minutes is up, I'm going to rest for at least 50 minutes before doing another test to give my hands a chance to reset. I'm going to take copious notes as to what my pain levels and stress levels are at the beginning of the 10 minutes, during the 10 minutes, and after the 10 minutes, including where and how intense the pain is. And what makes this science is writing down all of my results. So I'm going to be conducting 5 tests. The 5 methods that I'm going to be testing are circular needles, knitting flat, DPNs, knitting in the round, straight knitting, unsupported, straight knitting using the pit knitting technique, and straight knitting using a knitting sheath or a knitting stick. I would love to try a knitting belt, but I just don't have access to one, and I also don't have the materials to make one. So instead, I've made myself a knitting stick. If you're not familiar with what they are a bit of an old-fashioned tool. Basically, it's a stick with a hole in the end of it. It tucks into your belt and it holds your needle in place, so you don't have to strain your, in my case, right hand supporting that knitting needle. So basically you just need, they're usually made out of wood, and you need one that's going to be easy to insert and take out your knitting needle from. Looking at some modern ones, they are made from aluminum tubes, which reminded me of boba straws. So we ordered boba a few weeks ago and they sent us extra paper straws. So this is a boba straw with a plastic regular drink straw that I have inserted inside, you can see there. So that'll provide a stopper for the needle to keep it from sliding down the entire length of the knitting stick. So that's the experiments. Let's get started and see where we go. All right, test number 1, circular needles working in the round. Before I started, I had a slight ache in my wrist, not in my scaphoid, on the opposite side of my wrist, near the ulna. During, I was experiencing slight hand tremors, which started around the 7-minute mark. As soon as I started knitting, I had an immediate dull, acute pain in my right thumb. After 10 minutes of knitting, there was a definite ache in my wrist. Before I started knitting, it was about a 2 on the pain scale. I would say it was more like a 4 or 5 after the 10 minutes. There was a tightness and a dull ache in my right shoulder, around a 5 on the scale, on the pain scale. There was also an ache, not so much a pain, but more of an ache in my dorsal left forearm, around a 2 on the pain scale. Test number 2, DPNs in the round. Before this test, I again had a slight ache in my right wrist, on the opposite side of the scaphoid, around near the ulna. This was the most painful test. I felt an immediate sharp elbow pain. there was a full arm and hand tremor starting around the 6 or 7 minute mark. It was incredibly uncomfortable, incredibly painful. I almost didn't make it to the 10 minutes. I did almost tap out on this one. Afterwards, I had a sharp pain in my elbow, in my scaphoid, in my wrist. I had really bad tremors, and it was actually a little bit scary how painful and uncomfortable knitting with DPNs was. All right, test number 3, unsupported straights. So before, again, slight ache in my right wrist. I think I was just achy today, but I'm glad I noted it on all the tests individually. After, I had shoulder pain in my neck and tightness across my knuckles and along my forearm to my elbow. I had no tremors during the 10 minutes, no pain in my hand or arm. Test number 4, Straits, pit knitting. Before the test, I had no pain anywhere, actually. I was feeling better. Unfortunately, for this test, I had to tap out after about a minute. I could not get the positioning. I had T-Rex hands, everything was tight, everything was painful. I think this is just not going to be a valid method for me, given the fact that my body, from the point of my underarm to the front of my body, is so wide. So, test number 5, Straits with a knitting stick. Before, again, I was feeling no pain. Afterwards, I was tight and achy in my right shoulder near the neck, similar to what I was feeling with the unsupported straights, but my hand and arm were unaffected. I had no tremors, no pain, no tightness. It was difficult to get into position and it requires a belt around the widest part of me, which is a very uncomfortable way to sit. All right, and a few rows of knitting later, we're back. So I hope you enjoyed seeing the actual process of the different types of knitting. You can see that some definitely worked out better than others. So overall, in conclusion, for both fatigue and pain, Straits far and away were the winner, surprising me. In 10 minutes with the knitting stick, I felt no hand pain or pressure. In fact, very little pressure along my hand or arm at all. The only thing with the knitting stick is that positioning was a problem. I don't know how much of it you saw in that little clip, but trying to get it in the right at the right angle for knitting was a bit of a struggle, and also it requires me to wear a belt, which I don't usually do when I'm knitting. So I have to play with that a little bit more to find a way that is more comfortable. The straight knitting unsupported was also quite good. So if I'm not able to use a knitting stick, or if I'm not able to find a way to make that work, say if I'm out in public, I think knitting with straight needles is going to be a really valid alternative for me. The pit knitting, I got about a minute into the test. Yeah, that didn't work out. That didn't work out so much at all. And the DPNs, I was surprised I made it to the 10 minutes because I was experiencing a lot of pain with those. Again, surprising me. So overall, in my right hand, I experienced the most pain in this section of my wrist, in this section of my thumb, the scaphoid, and then along my arm, tightening around my elbow. In all of the methods, I was still feeling an ache in my shoulder. And I think that's because as I move the yarn around the needles, I'm always going to be moving this shoulder. I think if I really want to decrease that shoulder movement, I do need to learn how to flick. There is an excellent video that I'm going to link below, which shows a method of reducing your movements of knitting from 5 to 2, and it really reduces the movement of the shoulder. I found it super interesting, so I'm going to link that below to check out, and I think I'm going to be studying that a little bit, because if I can get that figured out, that might be the way to go. I wasn't testing for speed in this, I was only testing for comfort. So I know that there are ways to make knitting faster. I don't really care about fast at this point. I care about being able to do it consistently. And it looks like with the Straits, I'll be able to knit for long periods of time without the same pain and fatigue that I was experiencing before when I was mostly working with circulars and DPNs. In terms of hand tremors, I did not experience very many hand tremors during the course of this test, but I wasn't using small diameter needles, which was the source of the hand tremors. So I think on the next episode of Knitting Science with TH, we might test out straight needles, but in a variety of sizes. So I think that's it for me. I am so happy to be able to get back to knitting. I don't want anyone to take the conclusions that I drew in this video as me providing advice for your personal style of knitting. This was hugely personal for me. That's why I took notes on exactly where and how much pain I was feeling, because I knew that it was specific to my body. However, if you want to take this format and repeat the experiment yourself using different methods, I highly encourage you to do that. Definitely take notes. I'll show you the notes that I took very briefly. So you can see I wrote down, don't know how well you can read my chicken scratch, but I wrote down every single detail. Everywhere I felt pain, how long the pain lasted, what type of pain it was, and just how much I enjoyed different methods. So we're working on straight needles, which is great. I'm going to be making some adjustments to my Me Made wardrobe project, some adjustments to my queue, so that I can continue working on things knit flat. But I'm back to knitting, guys, and it feels great. So I hope you enjoyed. Right about now, you should be seeing some buttons popping up near my head. If you hit this one, you'll subscribe to the channel. If you hit one of these, you will be taken to another one of my various crafting related videos. And in the meantime, my friends, I would love to hear the results of your own knitting science down in the comments, or if you'd like to join the Discord, I will see you there. But most of all, I'll see you in my heart. All right, bye guys.